Today we are going to do cleanup, restore, and improve the video on a good old Atari 2600 game system. This one here is the classic 6-button Woody. They called it the Woody just because of the fake wood grain on the plastic. This is sort of the classic 2600. Great system, fun games even to this day. I can think of games like Combat, Adventure, Air-Sea Battle. There's a lot of classics, so it's still fun. But there is a downside, and it's the video output. The output on the 2600 looks like this. So at first, it's an RCA plug, so at first you think, oh, it's composite video, but if you try to plug it into a modern TV in the composite video input port, you know, the port that's generally yellow and uses an RCA jack like this, you'll find out, oops, it doesn't work, because this actually isn't composite video. Even though it's an RCA type plug, it's good old-fashioned coax. So you have to use the old-fashioned RF switch, channel 3, channel 4 kind of switches, which I have one here. This isn't the Atari kind. It looks like this is one off of my old Apple II computer, but the coax would come in, then you'd plug it into the cable, there you go, the cable input on your TV, and then you'd have to flip the switch to either channel 3, channel 4, and then you know, set the channel on the TV. So anyway, the Atari's great, but the video doesn't work with modern TVs, and plus it's sort of bad quality. This coax has video and audio all in the same signal. You get some interference. It doesn't look so great. So we're going to do two things. We're going to first clean this guy all up, because some of the switches are sort of getting sticky, so we'll make it really nice. And then we're going to add this right here. This is a little video upgrade kit that'll give it composite video. So we're going to solder a few joints on the inside, a few solder points on the inside to put this board in there, which it'll give these little jacks. Don't know if you can see it here, but standard RCA jacks for the left and right channels of the audio and the video. You know, your traditional yellow. You probably can't see that there. That's the yellow plug. And it'll be much better quality, and it'll work with the modern TVs that have a nice normal composite input on them. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Step one is to make sure that it is not plugged in. Obviously there's no power going to this 2600 before I start working on it. And then we're going to take the screws out. So it's flipped over, and in this particular unit there's going to be, I believe, 8 screws. So 2 down here, left, right, 2 on the sides, left, right, 2 up near the top. There they go. You may notice, it's not going to come out in the video, but some of these screws are at sort of a funny angle. So when you have your Phillips screwdriver, please notice that these screws along the top here are actually sort of at a strange angle, so the screwdriver won't go straight in. Anyway, the last 2 screws are those 2 right there. So we'll remove. Okay, the screws are out, and I flipped it back the right side around so we can take the top off. Notice one thing I'm in the habit of doing is when you take screws out of something, to mark where they were. Now in this case it appears that they're all exactly the same, so I didn't really need to do that, but that's a good habit to get into, because half the time when you take something like this apart, you find out one set of screws along one of the sides is different than the others. So just mark where they went, and it'll be easier to put back together. So now we're simply just going to slide the top off and get to the inside. Okay, we got the top off and just set it aside. The top comes right off. Now we're looking at the inside of the 2600. There's 2 more screws to take out. I took out a screw right here and a screw right here on the other side. There you go. So that this board is now loose. You'll also have to, we'll call this the coax. I almost called it the RCA cable. This is the coax line, so it's sort of stuck in that little plastic thing there. So you pop that out. Now the whole thing is loose, and you'll notice that it's actually plugged onto an RCA style plug right there, so we can actually take that right off. So I'll take that RCA plug off from the main board, and then there's one other connection right here that we'll take off. Okay, I have the board sitting here. I took off the coax video line, which was right there, and then this little pin had to detach, so that was very simple. It just slid right off, and now I have this top board. This is the main board I want to work on first. So first thing's real simple. All these switches, the little AB selection switches and on-off, are all sort of gunked up and sticking. Some of the AB difficulty selects aren't working, so I'm going to use a combination of some cotton swabs, Q-tips with either Windex or rubbing alcohol or electrical contact cleaner, and sort of get those all cleaned up. I'm not going to say which one because people have different thoughts on these. I generally use sort of a combination of the three. The electrical contact cleaner or deoxit is the best, but you make your own decision as is what's best to clean electronics. So I'll use the Q-tips, I'll put a lot of that on, I'll get it all cleaned up, I'll keep moving the switches while I'm doing it so it'll get all the gunk out of there, and I'll make sure that that is all dry before I move on to the next step. Okay, so we have everything all cleaned up nicely in here. For the inside of the case, it was full of dust. So just several wipes to clean that up. You can use a air blaster, an air duster thing. I usually try to avoid those unless when I need to, because it just blasts the dust all over the place, and it just gravity brings it right back to where you were cleaning. So it's nicer to use wipes. So I used a whole bunch of these wipes here and got it all clean. Interesting note, there were actually a few dead bug exoskeletons in here. So if I remember my history right, the reason for the name bug in software, as in a software defect is a software bug, is because in the early days of those big, huge computers, they actually physically had bugs in the machinery that made it mess up. So this was a case. There actually were a couple of dead bugs inside of this guy. So it's all nice and clean. And the switches are great now. Even the springy ones, nice and springy. I don't know why a minute ago I said I didn't really want to say which method I use. Pick your own method. I will let you know what I do. I pretty much blast everything with electrical contact cleaner, and then I use Q-tips, and then I switch them up and down about 50 times. So if you blast all these and then just keep switching them and switching them, they'll get all nice and clean. Use a Q-tip, get them all cleaned up, and you can see it worked because these Q-tips are pretty gunked up here. So switches are good. The up and down switches are working nicely. The ones that have little springs in them are bouncing back nicely, so that all seems good. Cleaned where the little video plug would go. Cleaned the other end of the video plug. Cleaned all the plastics inside of it. Oh, and I'll even note the port where the actual cartridge goes. If you can get a couple toothpicks, or in this case a little piece of cardboard, and press down the two holes that are on the extreme left and right, and you press down, it'll actually open up the slot where the little, I don't know what you call it, the little PCB board that accepts the cartridge connections. You can actually get to that. So then you can spray contact cleaner in there as well. A Q-tip won't fit in there, but what some people do is get some real thin piece of cardboard, maybe wrap a piece of cloth around it, and then you can sort of slide it back and forth and slide it in there, so you even get that all clean. Okay, last part in disassembly is this unit here with the electronic shield over it. The big metal piece just slides right on out. You just wiggle it a little bit and it comes out, and you can clean the joystick ports, clean the rest of the plastic, and then if you flip this guy over, there are 4 screws in the corners. You could take this off, and there you can finally get to the, we'll call this the main PCB board or the motherboard, and it looks like there are going to be 2 screws in this guy down there at the bottom that you need to remove, and you can get out that final piece to make sure everything is clean and you've got everything. One thing I forgot to mention, when I was working on this board earlier, and likewise when I'm about to work on this board, I like to set it on a piece of cardboard or a magazine or something. This time it's got some kind of soft-bound book, because the underside of the PC board has all the solder points. So in the perfect world, you wouldn't press down on that at all. So somebody who's really good at electronics would have some kind of gizmo that could actually hold this thing up in the air. Likewise, they'd have a thing that could hold PC boards up in the air when they're working on it. I don't have that. I have to set it down to work on it, but I still don't want to mess up any of the solder points, so I always like to set it on some kind of, cardboard. If you had some cloth or something, in this case just a magazine, just something to help make sure that if you're pressing down on it, you're not messing up all those solder points, because this is the underside of the board, so all of these points are going to be pressing down. So let's remove these last 2 screws and we'll have it completely disassembled.